What's up YouTube? Welcome back to Track Talk. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at Russ's album, Santiago. Santiago is Russ's 16th album, I believe, released in 2023 and is 13 songs in length. Before we jump into this album, going into this, I knew Russ was definitely more of an artist that was a little more outside of my typical rotation of artists, so I was intrigued to see how I would enjoy this album. So jumping right in, the first song on the album is the song See You Soon. It was definitely an intro kind of song, couldn't really give it a rating fairly, so cool vibe though, kind of to set the tone for the album, so I give it that, but not enough content in the song to give it a true proper ranking. Jumping into the first song we can give a rating to is the song Smooth. This song, Russ is just talking about how he's enjoying this life of luxury and how his career and how his music career has kind of put him on this trajectory where he has all these things that he's acquired and he's achieved and that he owns and possesses, and kind of how his life has changed because of it. I actually really enjoyed the song. I gave it an 8. I actually really liked the chorus in the song, and I think it was a good, following the intro, a good opener to the album from Russ. Then we have the song Fraud. Russ is talking about who he is beyond the fame and kind of starts to question himself and starts to possibly label himself as a fraud and kind of wants to figure out beyond music, beyond what he's done in his career, how other people would view him differently if he didn't have these accolades in this industry of music. And so he kind of starts to question himself and tries to think, is there more that he has to offer beyond music? I wasn't the biggest fan of the chorus on this song, so that definitely brought it down a little bit. I did give the song a 7, so still a very solid song, just wasn't a big fan of the chorus, so that kind of knocked it down a little bit for me. Following that, we have the song No More, kind of continuing from that previous song where Russ is kind of feeling these emotions of thinking, is there anything more beyond his music career and kind of what other people would view him. He's at this point where he's wanting to quit, and he's just feeling worn out and feeling helpless and feeling fatigued from these things that he's facing in his life. And like the previous song was titled Fraud, he starts to kind of believe that all his life is really just encapsulated by his music. Definitely wasn't the biggest fan of the song. Did receive a 6 from me, which was actually one of the lower rated songs on this album. Next we have the song Empty, where Russ is talking about trying to fill this void that he's been talking about in the previous 2 or 3 songs, that beyond music, what else is there in his life? So he's talking to himself, trying to find something in his life that he can fill this missing void with. I really like the singing part from Russ on this song. I think it was very melodic. The beat was very cool as well. I think that's something that Russ does a very good job of, and we'll talk a little bit later, is he's very versatile. So he has parts where he raps, he has parts where he sings, combination of both. And so this song, I think, encapsulated that, where it was a good mix of both that I really liked. So I gave the song an 8. It was a strong 8, almost got to a 9 for me. I think it was a little bit short of the 9 marker for me, but it did still receive an 8, so a very solid song. And then we have a very good song, I Love You Boy. This was the closest I got to a 10 on this album. I gave it a 9. This song, Russ is just talking about these traumas that he's faced growing up in his childhood, in the third person, kind of sort of narrating it. Something I really like was that in each of the verses, it kind of continues to move this thought process through Russ's mind throughout the song. So the first verse is kind of talking about the source of this trauma that he's facing, and in that second verse it's talking about how the ways he learned to cope with it and to kind of manage and mitigate these traumas that he faced growing up and still faces today. And then the third song is kind of him sort of patting himself on the back, or kind of telling himself to take it easy on himself, that he's gone through all of these things to show how much he's accomplished even with all these traumas and things that he's experienced in his life. I really liked Russ's rapping on this song, as well as the chorus, and I'm not sure if the chorus was sampled or if that was something else, but I did really enjoy it, so if it was sampled, it was definitely a very good sample to take. Following that, we had a song I wasn't a really big fan of, the song Enough. I gave it a 6. It was an interesting kind of song. It kind of sped up sort of abruptly right out the gate, which typically I actually enjoy, but I thought it was a little bit off mood here following that previous song. But this song, Russ is talking about the pressures that he's facing and that come with what he does in the music industry, being an artist, and how that kind of wears on him emotionally. Then we have the song Adventure, where Russ is talking about how he's comparing this journey that he's on and how he's faced these trials and tribulations in his life to an adventure that he's not necessarily lost. He's just on a journey, and he's on this adventure through life, and throughout facing these traumas, the difficulties, the ups and downs that he's faced, that he's kind of persevered, and he's not necessarily lost or off course. He's just on his way to his end destination, if you will. I really like the song, and I think it's also a very relatable song that you can kind of always feel a little bit off course, but at the end of the day, if you kind of stay committed to something, or committed to a path towards something, you can kind of call it this adventure, as the title hints, that you can kind of make sure you end up get to your final destination eventually. So I gave the song an 8, very solid song. Following that, we have the song Oasis, where Russ is talking about how throughout his music career and now he has everything he's ever dreamed of, music, money, cars, woman even. I think it's a very interesting comparison that Russ uses, that he's kind of trapped himself in this own little bubble or oasis, like the title suggests, that he is kind of surrounded by all these things that he's always dreamed of and always wanted, and that's kind of blinding him from the reality of all these things he's facing. I also really like the feature, which ended up being the chorus on this song, so I gave the song a 7. Then we have the song Fatima, where Russ is talking about how he's met this dream girl of his that continues to pull him further and further away and causes him to drift further away from this goal that he's been talking about throughout this album, which we'll kind of dive into a little bit more. But this idea of like self-love and self-worth that he's pursuing, that all these things around him, like I mentioned, money, cars, wealth, women, that are pulling him away from the idea and kind of shielding him from the realities that he's facing. And along the lines of that, it kind of is pulling him into this like fool's paradise, or kind of this la fairy tale land that he has everything he needs, and that money and this wealth and things he's accomplished are kind of enough to shield it. But deep down, I believe Russ kind of knows that he needs to work on these things and needs to improve his mental state on some of these things. I also gave the song a 7, very solid song. Following that, we have the song Distracted, where Russ kind of has this epiphany, this moment where he realizes that he kind of needs to get his act together. Like I said, these things that have kind of been distracting him or pulling him and drifting him further away, he realizes he needs to snap out of it, kind of get back on his track, on this journey, this adventure that he's mentioned previously in this album, towards these things, these feelings of self-love, self-worth, self-valuation, kind of all that kind of stuff that he is pursuing, but he's been kind of pulled away throughout. And I think, kind of he mentions it throughout the album, that there's certain things that kind of distract him. Obviously, the song Distracted here is kind of evident of that as well. So I gave the song a 7. Coming down to the last 2 songs here, we have the song Tunnel Vision. I gave the song an 8. I really liked it. This beginning part of the song, I believe, kind of symbolizes this like dream or this kind of trance that Russ is in, and then it snaps out of it when the beat comes in. And I really like the rapping on this song as well, where he's kind of talking about these goals that he's striving to get here, and how he's kind of back on this adventure and back on course here to overcome these challenges and these things that he's faced. And then the last song on the album is the song The Wind. Very good closing song. It seems like a lot of albums nowadays have good intros and good outros, which I feel like is a very fair assessment to make sure you have your beginning and conclusion nailed down. I really like this song because Russ is kind of just wrapping everything up here, kind of talking about how he has to let go of certain behaviors, certain characteristic traits, certain things that he's done in the past, certain things that have distracted him, from this journey he's on, to be able to truly get to this point where he can look at himself and self-evaluate himself, and to have this kind of mental reset for, looking at himself differently. I think is a very, very true thing in life, that we kind of have to do that a lot of the time, is to kind of clear our minds and kind of let some things go in order to be able to move on. So I gave the song a 9, very solid song. So my overall thoughts on the album, I ended up giving this album a 7.5 out of 10. Very solid album. Like I mentioned earlier, going into it, Russ was definitely more of a, off of my typical music that I tend to listen to. So it was definitely intriguing to figure out, certain songs I liked and certain songs I didn't like based on the style, which is pretty trendy, I would say, throughout my ratings here. Some things I really liked about the album in general as a whole is I really liked how the album flowed as one continuous song. It almost felt like it was a 41-minute song broken into individual tracks. And I'm a big fan of albums that do that, where you can just flow and play from the very start to the beginning, and it seems like it's just one continuous song, which I thought was really cool. And like we've seen throughout the album, there's this kind of main theme that Russ is talking about, how these things such as wealth, money, cars, etc. have kind of pulled him away from this self-validation that he's chasing after and pursuing, and kind of the obstacles and what he's done to overcome it, things that have distracted him, ways he's brought himself back to, like focus. Kind of that main theme throughout the entire album is obviously very present in every song. I really like albums that kind of have a main central theme that is encapsulated throughout the entire album, instead of kind of like nitpicking here and there with certain songs. And I believe this album is actually based off a book titled The Alchemist, where it's about this boy named Santiago and his journey, chasing these pyramids that Russ describes as these self-validation goals and self-love kind of things, are the pyramids in his life that he's chasing after. And it kind of shows this journey, the book that is this journey of the boy getting to the pyramids, and then obviously this album is kind of Russ's journey towards those feelings of self-validation. And obviously Russ, like I mentioned earlier, is a very, very diverse artist, so I really liked a lot of the different styles of beats, the different kind of rapping, the different kind of singing. Obviously very versatile, causes a lot of tracks to be different, which I'm a big fan of. I don't like albums that have 10 songs and 9 of them sound the exact same, because then each song loses its value to me. So in this kind of case, every song sounded different. for the most part, so every song kind of had its own individual charm in a way for me. Thank you all so much for watching. Let me know what y'all think in the comments. I'm actually going to put a link to my spreadsheet where I have all my albums ranked. You can see individual songs ranking. You can see our ranking of all the songs we have listened to. So I'm going to link that down below in the comment section, so go check that out. Let me know what y'all think. Comment who you want to see next. Subscribe if you're new, and we'll see you in the next video. Peace out.
Environment that was hostile, it got wild. Arguments you heard as a small child had an effect.